Hey guys, this week we're going to be making a decorative Christmas tree for the yard out of whiskey barrel rings. Stick around. Hello and welcome to this week's edition of BS with AJ. As I said before, this week we're going to be making a Christmas tree out of some whiskey barrel rings that I come across. I found an old whiskey barrel that had fallen apart and the only thing left of it was the ring. So I decided I'd go ahead and try and make a project out of it. This is going to be a collapsible Christmas tree, so that way it's easier to store on the off seasons and everything. So it's going to be a pretty cool project. We'll go ahead and get started with that here in just a few minutes. But if you like videos like this, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and consider supporting BS with AJ on Patreon so we can do bigger and better projects for you guys. Also, don't forget to hit that notification bell so you know when I post new videos. And if you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave those down in the comment section below. Alright guys, let's go ahead and get started. Alright guys, so for this week's project, I came across some whiskey barrel rings. And it came off a whiskey barrel that had already fallen apart, so I figured I could make some use out of them. So what we're going to be doing is making a yard decoration out of these rings. It's going to end up being a Christmas tree. We're going to put lights on it and paint it up and everything. So let's go ahead and get started now. Alright guys, I took the largest ring and the smallest ring, and it looks like there's about a 3-inch diameter difference. So we're going to go ahead and keep that same diameter difference between each of the rings as we go up. I did find an old saw blade that we could use for the top support. It's going to be strong enough to hold up the weight of all this. So what we're going to do is go ahead and cut the teeth off of here, and then we're going to go ahead and drill some holes in the top of it. That's where we're either going to tie our fishing line or our wire, whichever we come across. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Alright, now to get our bands down to the right size, we want to multiply the desired diameter times pi. So I went ahead and done this already, and I went ahead and rounded it to the nearest 1/4 inch because the only people that's going to see it are people driving by, and they're about 30 to 40 feet away, so they're not going to know any difference anyway. So to make it easier on me, I went ahead and rounded this up to the nearest 1/4 inch. So 19 is going to be 59 3/4, 16 is going to be 50 1/4, 13 is going to be 40 3/4, and 10 inch is going to be 31 1/2. So what we're going to do is go ahead and cut our bands down, and then we're going to weld them back together. We're going to go ahead and once we have them cut apart, we're going to go ahead and sand them down fairly decent just to get all the rust and everything off them, so that way the paint will actually stick and stay on for quite a while. So let's go ahead and get started on that now. Alright guys, so I used a circumference tape to measure this because they're thinner and they're a lot easier, they're a little more flexible and everything, so it's a lot easier to do that. So I went ahead and I put it on one side here, and you just kind of move it on around here to your measurement. So I went ahead and added a couple of inches, so that way instead of butt welding this, since this is a pretty thin material, I'm going to go ahead and overlap it by 2 inches, and I'm going to do a couple plug welds instead. guys, now that we have all those cut and welded back together to the size we want, we're going to go ahead and drill 8 holes in each of these rings on the top and on the bottom, so that way we can tie all of them together. Alright guys, I went ahead and primed and painted this off camera because it's a pretty simple process. I just used some spray paint so it didn't take too awful long. It took longer to dry than anything. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start tying this together. And I'm going to be using some 30-pound test fishing line. It's just really, it's a clear one. It's a pretty cheap one that I got at a local store here. So you won't be able to see that whenever you hang it up or anything like that from a distance. It shouldn't be a big deal. So to make sure I had these spaced evenly, I wanted to make this about 5 foot tall, or pretty close to it at least. So I went ahead and took a block and cut it down to 8.5 inches. And I'm going to use this as a spacer between each of them. So that way when I go to tie them together, they're all have the same length fishing line on them. So that way they're not hanging crooked or anything like that. I want to make sure this hangs pretty well straight because it wouldn't look good otherwise, of course. Alright guys, now for a stand to hold this tree up, we're going to be using a piece of 1/2 inch rebar. I've got a 10-foot piece here. We're going to go ahead and cut it down to 78 inches now. Now we're going to go ahead and put a stopper on the top of our rebar here, so that way whenever we go to put our whole Christmas tree piece over, it'll stop right here and the rest of it will just kind of hang down. So to do that, we've measured from the top of this rebar back 6 inches. That we're leaving that just in case we want to go ahead and add a star to it at some point in time. I'm not going to put one on it this year, but maybe next year. So what we're going to do is I took a 5/8 nut and I'm going to use that. I put it right at the 6-inch mark. I'm going to weld the top and the bottom of it to make sure it holds really well. And then we're going to take this 5/8 washer and we're going to put it on top of there and weld it down just to make sure that we have plenty of surface area to make sure that it's not going to try and fall through or anything. And also to give it lots of strength, because the thing probably weighs a good 15 to 20 pounds altogether, I'd say. And you want to make sure, since this is the only thing that's actually holding it up, that it's going to be strong enough to do that. Alright, now for a base for our pole to set in to hold up our tree, we're going to cut two 2-foot sections of this treated 2x4. Alright guys, now what we're going to do is we're going to cut halfway into both of these 2x4s right in the center, so that way whenever we go to put these together, they'll actually set flush. I've already got my miter saw set up to 3/4 of an inch. There's a little screw on the back that you can adjust and it keeps it from cutting all the way down. So I've got that set to 3/4 of an inch right now, which is half of our 2x4, since they're actually only 3.5 inches by 1.5 inches. Now, and then what I went ahead and did was I measured from one side over to the middle of it, which since this is a 2-foot board is 1 foot. And then I measured over 1 3/4 on each side of that line. So that way we can go ahead and cut our 2 outside lines and then slowly start eating away on the inside stuff, and we can come back and finish it up and clean it up real nice with a chisel. So we'll go ahead and start doing that now. now that we have this fitting nice and snug together, we're going to go ahead and drill a 1/2-inch hole right in the center here all the way through both of these boards. And that's going to help us to support the 1/2-inch rebar that we have. Alright guys, I went ahead and put all this together just to see how it was going to look, and I've decided to make just a few changes here. The first one is going to be the base here. I've already changed that. I just originally had the two 2-foot 2x4s that crossed as the base piece, but when I put my rebar in and I put the actual tree part on there, with all the weight being at the top and the height of the rebar being so tall, it ended up trying to lean one way or the other. So I went ahead and put 2 more 2x4s and drilled a 1/2-inch hole directly in the center of them. I screwed them down to the base so that way it doesn't lean anymore. And it also gives the base a lot more stability. So another thing we're going to do is this very bottom ring. I only wanted about 6 inches off the ground. So I'm going to go ahead and take that out and cut a few inches off the rebar. At the very top I left 6 inches in case I wanted to add a star to it. I'm probably going to go ahead and cut that down to 3.5, maybe 4 inches long or something like that. Doing these few little things here are going to help with the stability of this. So that way when you set it outside in the yard, if the wind starts blowing or something, there's a less chance that it's going to try and blow over or anything like that. So, like I said, I went ahead and added some 2x4s to the bottom. I've already done that part. I'm going to cut down the rebar at the bottom part, so the bottom ring's only about 6 inches off the ground, and I'm going to cut the top part down to about 3 inches. We're going to go ahead and start doing all that here in a few minutes, but before I go ahead and take off the tree rings here, we're going to go ahead and start putting the lights on here, so that way that part of it's done. I'm going to go ahead and hang all the lights, take it all apart, and then I'll cut down the rebar and I'll start painting the rebar. That way it's got... Alright guys, these are the lights that I'm going to be using. I went ahead and got this big pack here. It's got 62 foot of lighted length, and I'm not exactly sure how much I'm going to end up using on this, so I went ahead and got a bigger box just to be sure I had plenty. And I'm also going to be attaching them with these cable ties or zip ties, whatever you like to call them. We're going to go ahead and string them all on there, zip tie them down, and we'll cut off the excess so that way you don't see all the zip ties. The reason I'm using zip ties is so that when I go ahead and take it all apart, it can all stay together with the lights and everything already attached instead of having to put it on every single year. This will be a lot easier to store it. It'll be a lot easier to put it up and everything, so I think this is the best option. Guys, well that's our video for this week. I hope you enjoyed the project. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and consider supporting BS with AJ on Patreon so we can do bigger and better projects for you guys. Alright guys, we'll see you next week.